They looked too perfect to be trouble. 3 identical girls in pressed white collars, dragging matching Navy suitcases through Gate 19, like a line of miniature diplomats. But what happened next wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the kind of story that makes you stare at the screen, hold your breath, and wonder how adults forget what dignity looks like. This isn't one of those revenge stories. It's quieter than that. And somehow, that makes it hurt more. The airport at Incheon was awake, but still sleepy, bathed in that pale 6 a.m. light that turns metal cold and glass almost silver. Announcements echoed lazily over the PA. A janitor polished the corner of a window until he could see his reflection. The world was moving, but gently. Chloe Han, the oldest of the triplets by 11 minutes, held her sister's passports in one hand and the boarding passes in the other. "Keep your hands inside your coats," she whispered. "Dad says never lose your travel documents." Celine nodded like a soldier in miniature, chin up, eyes scanning. Clara just hummed quietly, the hem of her sweater brushing against her knees. They were 9, identical down to the tilt of their chins and the freckle under the right eye. 3 little mirrors reflecting the same calm. Their seats were in first class, row 1A through 1C. Tickets gifted by the Future Wings Foundation, an education program for children of public servants. To everyone watching, they might have looked like daughters of some diplomat. In truth, they were flying under anonymity orders. Their father, Minister Han, was traveling separately for an aviation summit in Singapore. The girls weren't supposed to attract attention. "Remember," Aunt Jiun had said before leaving them at security, her phone pressed to her ear. "You are not important passengers. You're just travelers. Be kind. Be quiet." They were always quiet. That's what people noticed most about the Han triplets. They didn't fidget, didn't interrupt, didn't demand. When adults spoke to them, they listened. When no one did, they listened anyway. Now, as they sat in the VIP lounge, the soft rustle of newspapers and espresso machines filling the air, Chloe studied the clock on the wall. 6:37 a.m., boarding in 23 minutes. She traced the numbers with her thumb, the way her father did when thinking through a decision. Across from them, a man in a charcoal suit glanced at the girls over the rim of his tablet. His expression was kind but puzzled. 3 children alone in a lounge meant for executives and foreign diplomats. He seemed to want to ask if they were lost, but didn't. People rarely did. Celine reached for the plate of shortbread cookies on the table and hesitated. "Do we pay for these?" she asked. Chloe shook her head. "No, they're included." "Everything's included for them," Clara murmured. "For who?" Celine asked. "The people who belong here." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. By 6:55, the lounge had begun to clear. The triplets gathered their things, adjusting their coats, straightening their skirts like tiny cadets. Their matching backpacks bore the small embroidered emblem of the Horizon Youth Program, a silver wing wrapped around a globe. They joined the short line at Gate 19, marked First Class, Priority Boarding. It felt like stepping into sunlight after being in shade. The people in front wore suits that whispered when they moved. Perfume drifted like invisible fences. The triplets stood at the end of the line, quiet, hands clasped. That's when she saw them. Paige Rutherford, senior flight attendant 39, hair pulled into a perfect blonde knot that looked sharp enough to cut paper. Her uniform was immaculate, every fold in its place, her badge gleaming with the golden letters Zenith Jet Executive Crew. Paige was the kind of person who carried authority like perfume. You smelled it before you saw it. Years of first-class service had trained her to recognize the real passengers, the polished, the wealthy, the ones who fit. When her gaze landed on the triplets, her lips curved, but not in kindness. She approached, clipboard in hand. "Sweethearts," she began, her voice smooth as stainless steel. "This line is for first-class passengers." Chloe lifted her chin. "Yes, ma'am. We're in 1A, 1B, and 1C. Paige blinked, surprised at the confidence, then extended her hand. "Let me see your boarding passes." Chloe handed them over carefully, both hands. Paige looked at the paper, real, official, with holographic print, and frowned anyway. "Who booked these?" she asked. "Our aunt," Chloe replied. "She works for the—" "For the what?" Paige interrupted, scanning the tickets again, then glancing at the girls' coats, at the modest duffel bags. No designer luggage. No parents in sight. "I see. So, no adults traveling with you?" Clara's voice was small. "She's waiting for us in Singapore." Paige tilted her head. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." A few people in line chuckled softly, not loud enough to be cruel, but loud enough for the girls to hear. Chloe's cheeks flushed. She looked down, her voice shrinking. "We're allowed to be here, ma'am." Paige leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Listen, sweetheart. Sometimes people make mistakes on bookings. Why don't you step aside until I verify this?" Her tone was syrup, but the kind that coats a knife. Celine's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Clara clutched her backpack like armor. Chloe just nodded once and said, "Yes, ma'am." They stepped aside. Behind them, the world continued boarding, indifferent. Suitcases rolled, heels clicked. The intercom called another flight. The girls stood by the window, framed against the gray morning. Outside, a Zenith jet aircraft idled on the tarmac, its logo catching the rising light like a blade. Celine whispered, "Do you think she'll let us on?" Chloe didn't answer right away. She was watching Paige, who now smiled brightly as she welcomed an older man in a tailored suit, bowing slightly as she handed him a glass of champagne. "Maybe," Chloe said finally. "Maybe not." And though she didn't know it yet, that was the moment everything began to tilt. The calm before the fracture, the silence before the system itself decided it had seen enough. The boarding gate buzzed with that quiet kind of urgency that always follows the words, "Final call." The metallic hum of suitcase wheels mixed with the steady voice of the PA system, calling out names that would never quite make it in time. Chloe, Han held her sister's hands tighter as the first-class passengers began to board. The girls stepped forward cautiously, the line moving like a slow, elegant current of pressed suits, pearl earrings, and passports in leather covers. The smell of espresso and jet fuel tangled in the air. Paige Rutherford, the senior flight attendant, stood by the gate desk. Her posture was perfect, her smile precise, her eyes sharp enough to slice through pretense. She'd been in this industry for 17 years. She'd seen every type of passenger, the real ones who belonged, and the pretenders who didn't. To Paige, spotting the difference was an art form. The real ones carried their confidence like a fragrance. The others tried too hard. When she saw the three girls again, small, identical, holding hands at the end of the first-class line, something in her gut twisted. "Sweethearts," she said, lowering her clipboard. "You're still here?" Chloe nodded, polite. "Yes, ma'am." "You said you were checking our tickets." Paige's smile stayed, but the warmth in it had gone missing. "And you're sure these seats are correct?" "Yes, ma'am. 1A, 1B, and 1C. People in line began to glance over, mildly curious. There was something off about three little girls standing in a space meant for business travelers and CEOs. A man in a designer jacket muttered, "What's going on?" Paige turned toward the girls again, voice lower now. "You don't have parents traveling with you?" "Our aunt is meeting us in Singapore," Celine said softly. "Oh," Paige said, her tone almost mocking. "How convenient." She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You see, this section is for first class, not—" She paused, eyes flicking over their modest coats, "children on field trips." The people in line chuckled quietly. The kind of laughter that cuts twice. The first time when you hear it, the second when you realize no one stopped it. Chloe felt her throat tighten. "We're not on a field trip, ma'am. We're going to—" "I'm sure you are," Paige interrupted, snapping her fingers toward the gate agent. "Let's get this cleared up before these little actresses delay my flight." The gate agent, a young man who'd clearly been trained to follow orders, looked uncertain. "Their tickets are valid, Ms. Rutherford." Paige didn't even look at him. "Check again." Sometimes the system prints upgrades when it shouldn't. She crouched slightly, eye level with the girls. Her smile returned, sharp, sugar-coated, mean. Listen, I've been doing this for a long time. I know who belongs up there and who doesn't. You don't have to pretend. Celine's eyes shimmered, her small hands trembling as she clutched the boarding pass. We're not pretending. Paige snatched the tickets from her hands, scanned them with her badge scanner, and frowned when the green light confirmed authenticity. It annoyed her more than if it hadn't worked. She said, holding the tickets up to the light like they were counterfeit bills. Maybe someone pulled a favor for you. Still, I'll need to see identification. Chloe reached into her coat pocket and handed over the passports. The Navy covers bore the Republic of Korea emblem, their names written neatly inside. Paige flipped through them too fast, then closed them with a sigh. Where's your guardian? She demanded. She had to take a call, Chloe said carefully. Uh-huh. Paige straightened, raising her voice just enough for the nearby passengers to hear. So, no adult, no guardian, and yet 3 seats in first class. You can understand why that seems suspicious. The crowd's energy shifted. Not quite hostile, but detached. The kind of silence that lets humiliation grow legs. Clara stepped back until her shoulder touched the glass wall. Her reflection looked smaller than she remembered. Please, Celine whispered. We didn't do anything wrong. Paige's tone hardened. You don't belong in that cabin. Step aside. The words step aside hit harder than they should have. It wasn't a shout, but the authority in it left no room for error. The girls moved toward the wall obediently, their eyes down. Behind the gate counter, the agent opened his mouth to object, then closed it again. He needed this job. Chloe felt the stares pressing against her like heat. Someone behind her sighed loudly. Someone else muttered, "Just let the woman do her job." She looked at Paige again, her pulse pounding. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "our tickets are real. You can call the—" Paige's hand sliced through the air. "Enough." She turned her head sharply toward the gate agent. "Cancel these seats and put them on standby." The agent froze. "But, Ms. Rutherford—" Paige didn't even look back. "Do it!" The intercom crackled overhead. "First-class passengers for Zenith Jet Flight 212, final boarding." Chloe's chest tightened. The girls' luggage sat neatly by their feet, tags already printed, names perfectly aligned. They'd followed every rule, every instruction. They had done nothing wrong. Still, in that moment, they became invisible. Paige smiled to herself, satisfied, as she began greeting the next passengers. Real ones, she thought. The kind who carried themselves like currency. When the last of the suits had walked past, Paige turned back to the girls. "You can wait over there," she said, pointing to a plastic bench near the economy gate. "I'll let you know when the captain approves your downgrade." She walked away, leaving the smell of perfume and authority behind her. Celine's voice cracked. "She hates us." Chloe shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "She doesn't even see us." Through the window, the morning light had grown brighter, but colder too. The Zenith Jet logo gleamed on the plane's silver body, a perfect mirror for everything wrong with the world that morning. And somewhere, in the quiet corner of the gate, the smallest sound broke the stillness. The faint electronic beep from a metal tag deep inside Chloe's bag, one that hadn't been touched. It blinked once, then went dark. No one noticed. Not yet. But 5 minutes later, the sky would. The last of the first-class passengers drifted down the jet bridge, the kind of people whose shoes didn't squeak and whose watches knew what time it was in 3 cities at once. The gate printer spat a final boarding list like a sigh. The PA voice softened into background air. Chloe kept her sisters close, their coat sleeves touching, their luggage lined up the way their father taught them at home. Wheels in, handles down, names facing out. When the line cleared, Paige Rutherford returned. Her smile stretched thin as if someone had pulled it tight and tied a knot behind her ears. "All right," she said brightly, as if speaking to a classroom. Now that the important passengers are on board, let's tidy up this little misunderstanding. She held their 3 boarding passes between 2 fingers, flipping them like she was shuffling small, unworthy things. The scanner light had turned green earlier, but she'd decided that didn't matter. Authority, to Paige, wasn't about what the system said. It was about what she decided. "Please," Chloe said, choosing her words the careful way she always did. "We followed every instruction." "If you call..." "Enough!" Paige snapped, and the words slipped through the quiet like a blade. She looked at the gate agent. "Stand by. Reissue an economy, or bump to the next flight." The agent's eyes flickered. He didn't agree, but he also didn't belong to himself while he wore that jacket. He adjusted his tie instead. Clara tried to breathe slower, the way Aunt Ji-un taught them. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 4. Steady your hands. Her fingers still shook. She reached down to lift her duffel, but the strap had twisted itself into a knot. She knelt to fix it. "Up," Paige said, the word flat. "You don't kneel in a priority lane." Clara rose too fast and bumped the gate stanchion. The velvet rope shivered. Someone farther back laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh that isn't meant to be heard but is always heard anyway. Celine edged behind Chloe, eyes shining in a way she didn't let become tears. "We're not trying to make trouble," she whispered. "We just want to sit where our tickets say." "And I want a quiet boarding," Paige replied, "which I'm not getting." She lifted the girls' passports again without care, cracking the stiff covers, bending them backward. "Where's your guardian? On a call is not a guardian." "We're meeting her at the gate in Singapore," Chloe said. "Children," Paige said, voice slow, rehearsed, while she tucked the passports against her clipboard. "First class isn't a parade. It isn't a photo op. It is a premium cabin. Premium. Do you know what the word means?" Chloe's throat worked once. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then step aside." Paige angled her body, guiding them toward the plastic benches by the economy lane. The ones with the peeling armrests and the gum stain no one could quite get off. They didn't move. It wasn't defiance. It was something simpler than that. 3 small feet not remembering how to walk in a place that had just told them they didn't belong. Paige frowned, tilted her head like a metronome clicking toward impatience. She reached out, not for a hand, not for a suitcase, but for Chloe's boarding pass, pinched at the corner, tugging. "Please don't," Chloe said softly, fingers tightening. Paige tugged harder. The paper ripped. The sound was thin, almost silly, but it went through the girls like a cold wind. Chloe looked down at the torn corner in her hand, then up at Paige, trying to find a polite word for disbelief and failing to find any word at all. "What did I say?" Paige murmured, the kind of softness that comes before thunder. "Step aside." Celine's grip on Chloe's sleeve loosened. She reached to rescue the rest of the pass, and in that overlap of hands and impatience, Paige's palm flashed forward. The slap landed flat across Celine's cheek. Clean, practiced. A motion that had nothing to do with losing control and everything to do with asserting it. The sound was not loud, not really, but the terminal seemed to inhale and hold it. Metal, glass, carpet, people. Everything drew the moment in and would not let it out. Celine stumbled half a step. She didn't fall. She didn't cry. She put her hand on the nearest thing, the stanchion post, and the world steadied 1 inch at a time. Paige's face did not change. "I said," she repeated, "step aside." Clara's breath hitched, a small animal sound she swallowed before anyone could hear. She moved in front of Celine without knowing she'd moved at all, as if her body had its own rule book and page 1 said, "Protect your sister." Chloe lifted her chin, not high, just enough to keep her voice from scraping. "You can't." The second slap clipped Chloe's jaw, a sideways snap that turned her face where Paige wanted it to face. Away. The neat twist of Chloe's ponytail shifted, ribbon sliding a 1/4 inch. She steadied herself with the handle of her suitcase, fingers white around the plastic. A businessman in a navy suit said, "Hey," and then remembered his calendar and closed his mouth. A woman with a pearl clip fumbled her phone and didn't quite press record. "Stop," Clara said. It was not a shout. It was the softest word in the language, said with everything inside it. Paige pivoted to her, eyes narrowed, mouth a straight rule. "You're interfering with boarding." Clara took a step back. Paige took a step forward. The third slap was the smallest and somehow the worst. Small because Clara was small, because the palm stopped just short of full force, because even cruelty has a scale. Worst because by then everyone knew what was happening and still nothing moved to stop it. The humiliation landed where the hand did, and it stuck. Silence grew roots. The gate agent's fingers hovered over the keyboard. 10 small statues. A security guard near the wall looked at the floor tiles as if they had instructions printed on them, and he'd forgotten his glasses. The PA called for a connecting flight in a different hall, a human voice somewhere else doing its job. Paige brushed at her sleeve, as if dust might have landed there. "There we are," she said, collecting the torn boarding passes into a tidy stack. "You've delayed enough people for one morning." She turned to the jet bridge and said to no one in particular, "Door can close." The automatic doors whirred. The jet bridge light shifted from steady white to the pale yellow that means almost gone. Chloe reached down, lifted the piece of paper still in her hand, the torn corner with the hologram. She set it carefully on top of the suitcase. Then she picked up the strap that had twisted earlier and righted it. "Order first," her father always said, "then action." She looked at Celine. The cheek was flushing slowly, a warm handprint of somebody else's certainty. Celine nodded once. "I'm here." Chloe looked at Clara. Her eyes were bright as winter. Clara nodded. "I'm here too." Chloe slid her hand into the side pocket of her backpack, feeling for the small metal tag she wasn't supposed to need. It was cool, the way coins are cool in the morning. Her thumb found the engraved wing and pressed, out of habit more than hope. Nothing lit. The tag had been deactivated months ago. She knew that. She closed her hand around it anyway. Not to use it, but to remember what it had meant when it worked. You are not invisible. "Please," Chloe said to the air. To no one. To everyone. Not a plea to be let on. Not anymore. A plea for someone to see. No one answered. Not Paige, who had already turned away. Not the agent, who had already learned how to make himself smaller inside a uniform. Not the passengers, who had already chosen the flight over the moment. But somewhere beyond the glass, beyond the jet bridge and the wing and the painted lines and the cones, the morning shifted. A camera above the gate, one of 100 eyes that never blink, watched a frame that crossed a line it had been taught to recognize. The algorithm that lived in that eye did what it was written to do when it saw a protected minor struck. It did not call for a supervisor. It did not ask a question. It reached for a cord that humans had tied around the sky and gave it the gentlest pull. A single tone murmured through the ceiling, so soft it could be mistaken for air conditioning. The boarding screen blinked. The status bar flickered. Not off, not on, but thinking. Paige didn't notice. She smoothed her hair, lifted her shoulders, and walked toward the jet bridge with the satisfied step of someone who believes the world is exactly as she says it is. Chloe let go of the tag. She took her sister's hands again. "We're okay," she said, and felt the words ring truer than the situation deserved. Behind them, the automatic door hesitated. The light above the gate shifted to red. A message crawled across the screen in a language that didn't ask permission. Horizon Ethics Trigger Hold. The terminal didn't gasp. It simply stopped, as if the building itself had remembered something it had promised long ago. And in that held breath, the slap finally echoed, out of cheeks and paper and silence, into systems. The terminal didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then the usual sounds. The rolling of bags, the click of heels, started again, just a little offbeat, like a song that had lost its rhythm. Paige Rutherford didn't look back. She was already halfway down the jet bridge, straightening her collar, rehearsing the line she'd use if anyone asked why 3 unaccompanied minors had been denied boarding. Safety protocol, she'd say. Miscommunication. The kind of phrase that cushions guilt until it feels like procedure. At the gate, the 3 girls stood by themselves. Their reflections shimmered on the tall glass window. 3 small silhouettes against the vast silver of the waiting plane. Outside, the light had turned hard and white, like the morning no longer wanted to be gentle. Chloe reached into her backpack. Inside, under the neatly folded sweater her aunt had packed, lay the object she wasn't supposed to touch, an oval piece of brushed steel, the size of her palm. It looked harmless, a commemorative badge from the Horizon Youth Program. But it wasn't just a souvenir. She'd found it again 2 weeks ago, tucked in a drawer, the day she overheard her father talking on the phone. He'd mentioned deactivations, ethics upgrades, and retraining delays. She hadn't understood all of it, but she remembered one thing he said to whoever was on the line. "We built this system so the smallest voice couldn't be erased. Not again." Now, in the silence of Gate 19, that line came back to her. She turned the badge over in her hands, her thumb tracing the faint engraving of a wing and the word Horizon. Celine noticed. "Chloe, don't," she whispered. "Dad said it doesn't work anymore." "I know," Chloe answered softly. "But maybe it remembers." Clara's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, to the black domes of the security cameras. "Someone saw, right? It was on camera." Chloe didn't answer. She pressed her thumb to the badge's center. Nothing happened. No light, no sound, just cool metal. Paige's laughter drifted faintly from the jet bridge. She was greeting another passenger now, her tone suddenly melodic again. That voice people liked, the professional one, polished and full of empty comfort. The badge stayed dark. Chloe exhaled, the breath shivering. "It's dead." She dropped it back into her bag. But as she zipped the pocket, she thought she saw something, a blink, a bare flicker like a machine thinking about waking up. It went dark again before she could be sure. At the far end of the concourse, a maintenance worker pushed his cart past an emergency access panel. Hidden behind the metal grill was a fiber optic hub feeding the building's internal network. A tiny diode blinked once, green, then amber, then red. Inside a server closet 3 floors below, an algorithm wrote a single line into the security log. Ethics pattern deviation, potential child abuse, protected minor. No one saw it, no human anyway. Back upstairs, Celine tugged her sister's sleeve. "Can we call Aunt G on?" Chloe shook her head. "She's in the meeting. Remember what she said? No calls unless it's emergency," Clara finished. Her voice was small. "Isn't this one?" Before Chloe could answer, the gate agent's headset crackled. He turned slightly, listening. "Yes, this is Gate 19, he said quietly. "Uh-huh. No, everything's fine. Just a delay on final clearance." His eyes slid to the girls, then away again. "Copy that." He hung up, wiped his forehead, and reopened the boarding gate on his screen. But the system froze. The cursor spun. A message appeared. "Horizon Protocol. Admin lock, awaiting verification." He blinked. "What the?" The boarding display flickered, the flight status turning from boarding closed to hold. Passengers waiting nearby glanced up. "Another delay?" someone muttered. "Technical issue," the agent murmured automatically. The universal lie of airports. 5 miles across the city, in a secure floor of the Asia-Pacific Aviation Command Center, an analyst looked up from her coffee as her monitor lit with a new code. Horizon 9A. Ethics trigger detected. "What the hell is that?" her colleague asked. She scrolled, frowning. "That tag's been inactive since March. So it's a bug? Maybe. But look, it's tied to the Han family security registry." Her colleague's chair creaked. "As in Minister Han?" She didn't answer. Instead, she keyed the intercom. "Director Ji-un, we might have a false activation, or not so false." Gate 19, Incheon International. Zenith Jet Flight 212. There was a pause. Then a voice over the speaker, low, steady. The kind of calm that only came from someone who had trained for crises and hoped never to see them. Confirm visual feed. Uploading now. On the screen they saw it. 3 children standing alone at the gate. One rubbed her cheek. Another clutched a duffel strap with both hands. The third, Chloe, looked directly at the camera, as if she knew it was there. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Director?" Lock down the flight. Quietly. No public alert yet. Activate Level 1 containment. Under what authority? Under mine. Back at Gate 19, the badge inside Chloe's backpack pulsed once. Dim, then steady, like a heartbeat. She didn't see it, but she felt something shift in the air. A pressure change. A sudden stillness that wasn't silence, but listening. Paige reemerged from the jet bridge, frustrated. "Why haven't we pushed back yet?" she asked the gate agent. He shrugged helplessly. "System's locked. Says something about an ethics hold." Paige laughed, incredulous. "Ethics hold? That's not a thing." But as she said it, the lights above the gate dimmed. The hum of the conveyor belt slowed, then stopped. A soft tone chimed through the speakers. 3 notes rising, 1 falling. The air conditioning fans paused. Even the flight monitors across the terminal blinked simultaneously, switching to a gray screen. Passengers looked around. Phones buzzed with notifications that no one understood. Paige's voice cracked a little. "What's happening?" Chloe looked up at her. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was something older than either of those. "It's not us," she said quietly. "It's the sky." Paige frowned, about to answer, but the intercom beat her to it. "Attention! Horizon Protocol activated. All Zenith jet flights suspended pending review." The words dropped into the air like stones into water, ripples spreading outward. First confusion, then fear, then something close to awe. The gate agent's headset crackled again. He listened, then looked at the girls, pale. "Ma'am," he said to Paige, "we've been ordered to stand down. The airline's under ethics audit." Paige stared at him, then at the children, then back at the dark window where the plane waited. Engines quiet. "Who did this?" she whispered. No one answered. Far above them, satellites adjusted their telemetry, redirecting feeds towards 7 countries. Data packets moved faster than apologies ever could. Down at Gate 19, Chloe closed her backpack gently, her thumb resting on the seam of the zipper. The badge inside glowed one last time before going dark again. Its job done. She didn't smile. She just stood a little straighter, the way her brother used to when called to attention. For the first time that morning, the 3 sisters didn't look small. They looked seen. The lights in the terminal hadn't gone out. They'd simply shifted. What used to be white had turned the faint color of ash, like the airport itself was holding its breath. Paige Rutherford stood frozen in the middle of Gate 19, a boarding manifest still in her hand. "It's just a glitch," she said out loud, mostly to convince herself. "Someone tripped a breaker." No one answered. Behind her, the gate agent's screen displayed a single blinking message. "System hold. Ethics protocol initiated." He tried typing again. Nothing. The keyboard didn't respond. The boarding scanner light, usually green, was pulsing red, slow and deliberate. Passengers shifted uneasily. Phones buzzed with alerts from airline apps. Flight suspended. Await further instruction. Nobody knew what ethics protocol meant, but it didn't sound like weather or maintenance. It sounded personal. At the center of the gate, the 3 sisters stood together. Celine pressed her palm to her cheek where Paige's handprint still burned faintly pink. Clara clutched the handle of her small duffel so tightly the fabric creaked. Chloe stood between them, perfectly still, like someone listening for a sound no one else could hear. "Chloe," Clara whispered, "did you do something?" Chloe shook her head slowly. "No, not me." Her bag was zipped, the badge inside hidden from view, but something about the air felt charged, like the moment before thunder. Page exhaled sharply and turned to the gate agent. "Call maintenance. Tell them to reboot the terminal." He shook his head. "It's not local. Look." He pointed toward the flight display above them. Every other Zenith jet flight code on the board had grayed out. Departures suspended, awaiting clearance. Page's lips parted. "That can't be right. It's network-wide," the agent said. "All connected hubs, 5 miles away, in the glass tower of the Asia-Pacific Aviation Command Center." Analysts stared at their monitors as red pins lit up across the map. "Gate 19 was first," said the technician at the console. "Now the cascades hit Osaka, Manila, Sydney, and Seoul terminals, all Zenith jet routes locked out of federal airspace." A woman in a dark blazer crossed her arms. "Who authorized the Horizon Protocol?" "Unknown," the technician said. "There's no operator signature. It's autonomous. Impossible. That system requires dual verification." "Ma'am," he said quietly, "it verified itself." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the woman murmured, "The AI watchdog reactivated." She tapped her earpiece. "Get me Minister Han. Tell him the sky just intervened." At the terminal, Page's confidence began to unravel. She tugged at her collar, scanning the crowd for some official explanation she could use later. Something that didn't sound like superstition. "This isn't me," she told the passengers nearby. "The system's just confused." But her voice trembled on the last word. Celine looked up at her with eyes too calm for 9 years old. "Sometimes systems wake up when people forget how to act right." Page blinked, thrown by the poise in the child's tone. "Excuse me?" Chloe's voice was soft. "You said we didn't belong. Maybe the sky disagreed." That was when every phone in the gate chimed at once. Screens lit up with an emergency ticker. Notice, Horizon Ethics Alert. Passenger dignity violation under review affected flights. Zenith Jet 01ZX212, Gate 19 and related routes. Whispers spread like static. "What's a dignity violation? Is this real? Who are those kids?" Page took a step back. The gate agent tried to calm the crowd, but even he was whispering now. Across the ocean, in the control room of Horizon Defense Analytics, a young specialist stared at the stream of data. "It's not just shutting flights," she said. "It's logging video evidence." "Of what?" her supervisor asked. She turned the monitor toward him. "Gate 19, Incheon, 3 minors, 1 crew member, pattern match, physical aggression against protected dependents." He leaned closer. "Protected dependents? You mean those badges?" "Yes, sir. The Horizon badges. Someone tried to revoke the program last quarter. Guess it didn't forget how to work." Back at Gate 19, the hum of the building deepened, as if something vast and invisible was thinking. Chloe's backpack shifted slightly where it hung on her shoulder. A faint glow seeped through the zipper seam, blue, then white, like light under deep water. Clara saw it first. "Chloe." "I know," Chloe whispered. "Don't say anything." Paige turned toward them again, voice sharp to hide her fear. "You, what's in that bag?" "Books," Chloe said evenly, "and something that used to listen." Paige's eyes narrowed. "You're not clever, sweetheart. You're just scared." "Maybe," Chloe replied, "but the sky's not." The loudspeaker crackled overhead. A voice, calm and official, filled the terminal. "Attention passengers. Effective immediately, all Zenith jet operations are under ethics review. Flights are grounded pending federal clearance. Please remain where you are." The announcement was repeated in Korean, Japanese, and English. Celine clutched her sister's arm. "It's really happening." Chloe looked toward the windows where planes sat idle under the bright morning sun. "It's not revenge," she said quietly. "It's response." Paige's hands shook as she reached for her phone. It buzzed before she could dial. A message appeared from Zenith Jet headquarters. "All crew report to nearest federal liaison. Compliance mandatory. Do not engage media." Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The gate agent stepped back from his desk, headset slipping. "Ms. Rutherford," he said softly, "they're asking for you." "For what?" He didn't answer. In the corner, the triplets sat down together on the bench where Paige had told them to wait earlier. It didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like a front-row seat to a truth unspooling in real time. Clara leaned her head on Chloe's shoulder. Dad always said the system sees everything. Chloe nodded. Yeah, he just didn't say when it would start caring. Outside, the sound of turbines fading to silence rippled through the runways. A whole fleet of planes stopped mid-sequence, doors sealed, engines cooling, as if the sky itself had folded its arms. Paige stood alone near the glass, watching the reflection of the three girls in the window. For the first time, her own reflection didn't look like authority. It looked like guilt. She turned to say something, to explain, to justify. But Chloe's gaze met hers, steady, calm, unblinking. It wasn't anger in the girl's eyes. It was something worse for Paige, recognition, the same kind a mirror gives when it finally decides to tell the truth. For a full minute, no one spoke. The airport was still awake, but it wasn't alive. The hum of the air conditioning had stopped. The boarding signs had gone gray. Even the music, the generic instrumental that looped through every terminal in the world, had cut off mid-note. It wasn't chaos. It was stranger than that. It was silence that knew. Paige Rutherford stood in the middle of Gate 19, her hands trembling just enough to make the plastic boarding cards in her grip rattle. She stared at the monitors overhead, watching one word repeat on every screen. Hold. She tried to laugh. You're kidding me, she said too loudly. This can't be happening because of... She stopped herself before saying them. The passengers behind her started whispering. The man with the designer jacket murmured to his wife, They said 9 airports are frozen. 9. His wife frowned. All Zenith jet routes? Yeah. The newsfeed says, ethics suspension under Horizon Protocol. What does that even mean? A few people started filming. Paige turned sharply, hands raised. Put those away, she snapped. You don't film crew without permission. Her voice echoed through the unnatural quiet. No one lowered their phones. At the center of it all, the three sisters sat shoulder to shoulder on the plastic bench, legs still, eyes wide. Celine's whisper broke the hush. Chloe, what's happening? Chloe's reply was quiet enough that only her sisters could hear. 5 minutes. Clara frowned. 5 minutes until what? Chloe didn't answer, because she didn't know either. She just knew something had started. A process too big to stop and too moral to ignore. Outside the window, the first signs appeared. The jet bridge lights blinked red. The engines on the parked plane wound down with a soft metallic sigh. Then the intercom crackled again. This time thinner, more static between words. Attention! All terminals. Stand by under Horizon Command. Repeat, Horizon Command. The agent's headset buzzed with overlapping voices, commands, verifications, confusion. He stood frozen, one hand pressed to his earpiece. Then, in a whisper that trembled just enough to betray fear, he said, It's everywhere. Japan, Singapore, Sydney. The whole fleet's grounded. Paige spun toward him. That's impossible. He didn't argue. He didn't even look at her. He just said, They said it was triggered by a dependent badge. Paige's jaw dropped. A what? He swallowed. A child security tag registered under Horizon. They're calling it a federal activation. She blinked, the words bouncing around inside her skull. You're saying, he met her eyes, that kid's badge did this. Paige turned toward Chloe. You? She whispered, disbelieving. You did this? Chloe looked up. Her eyes weren't angry. They were calm. Too calm. I didn't do anything, ma'am. Celine added softly. It's doing it by itself. The crowd murmured again. Phones filming, people whispering. Someone muttered, that's her. That's the kid. In the command center across the city, screens glowed with cascading data. Confirm cross-link to FAA servers, one technician ordered. Confirmed. 9 airports suspended. Auto-trigger authorized at Incheon. Who's the registered dependent? Brooks family clearance. A woman in uniform looked up. Wait, did you say Brooks? The technician nodded. Yes, ma'am. Brooks, Charlotte. No, correction. Han Charlotte. Dual registration. The woman exhaled. She's part of the Horizon Founders Test Group. That's a prototype badge. It's not supposed to trigger without operator consent. Apparently, the technician said. It didn't ask for one. Back at Gate 19, the seconds dragged like hours. Every person in the terminal could feel it, the invisible current of something bigger than them unfolding just out of reach. Paige took a step toward the girls. Look, she said, voice brittle. Whatever this is, it's a mistake. You don't understand how serious. Celine flinched when Paige moved closer, and the reaction made the onlookers tense. A man near the gate called out, Ma'am, maybe give them space. Paige turned on him, furious. You don't know what's happening. No, he said quietly, but I saw what happened before. She froze. The truth was that everyone had seen it. The slap, the trembling children, the stunned silence afterward. And now, with every screen in the airport flickering red, they knew it wasn't going away. A vibration hummed through the floor as the PA system clicked back to life. The voice this time was lower, slower, deliberate. Gray flag protocol engaged. Horizon ethics review in progress. Zenith jet operations suspended at 9 airports. Passengers remain seated. All staff report to compliance officers. You could have heard a heartbeat drop. Then the murmurs started. Waves of disbelief. 9 airports? Ethics review? What's a gray flag? Paige's face drained of color. 9 airports, she whispered. Oh my God. Chloe's gaze followed the people filming her, then the gate agents shaking hands, then Paige's unraveling posture. She didn't feel triumph. She felt the strange weight of justice that wasn't hers to control. This isn't about me, she murmured. Clara leaned close. Then who? The system, Chloe said simply. It remembered. 5 minutes passed. 5 minutes of silence so pure it felt sacred. In that stillness, you could feel the scale of consequence moving. Slow, deliberate, irreversible. Somewhere beyond the glass, the roar of jet engines was gone. A bird flew past, unnoticed. A small child asked her mother why the lights had stopped blinking. Chloe sat perfectly straight, her hand folded in her lap, her sisters beside her. Paige stood a few feet away, rigid, shaking, mascara running down one side of her face. In another part of the terminal, a journalist whispered into his mic, This is Gate 19 at Incheon International. For the first time in history, an entire airline has been frozen by an automated ethics system. Sources say the trigger came from a child's badge, one registered to a family within the Horizon safety network. His producer hissed, Keep rolling. The announcement came once more, softer this time, like a benediction. All operations under review. Passenger dignity is non-negotiable. Please remain calm. Paige looked around, desperate for control, for logic, for a way back to the world where she still had authority. But that world had ended exactly 5 minutes ago. Chloe finally stood. Her sisters followed. She looked at Paige, her voice barely above a whisper. You told us to step aside. Now the world has. Paige blinked, stunned. What are you talking about? But Chloe didn't explain. She just turned toward the window, watching the planes grounded in their silver rows like giants made to kneel. 5 minutes earlier, the world had ignored 3 little girls in first class. Now, it couldn't look away. It started with the headlines. By the time the sun set over Seoul, every screen in the terminal had turned into a mirror reflecting one event. Gate 19. Within hours, a grainy clip surfaced online. Paige Rutherford's hand raised mid-motion, the sharp echo of contact, and 3 small faces frozen in disbelief. Someone had added captions, When Silence Fights Back. By morning, it had 40 million views. At Zenith Jet headquarters, the boardroom smelled like expensive panic. Coffee gone cold, shirts clinging to sweat, executives whispering numbers that didn't sound real anymore. On the wall, a projection showed 9 red dots blinking across a map of the Pacific. 9 airports, said the CFO, rubbing his temples. All our operations frozen under gray flag. The CEO didn't look up. His tie was loosened, his voice measured but cracked at the edges. How long? 7 hours since the first trigger. Cost? The CFO hesitated. 9.3 million in immediate losses, 6.7 in delayed partnerships, and, he paused, the federal ethics audit goes live in 30 minutes. No one spoke after that. A junior executive scrolled through a social feed projected onto the wall. The hashtags were already trending worldwide. Gate 19, Sky Justice #Horizon Protocol. Dignity is policy. What's the sentiment analysis? The CEO asked quietly. The young analyst swallowed. 89% negative, sir. Negative toward who? The analyst hesitated, then said, us. At the airport, news crews had gathered outside the security cordon. Reporters whispered words like federal, classified, AI override. Inside Gate 19, the crowd was thinning, but no one had really left. Even those who'd been rebooked lingered near the windows, waiting to see what would happen next. Paige sat in a metal chair by the wall, her airline badge turned face down on the lanyard. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had spent the last hour trying to convince herself it was all an overreaction, that things like this blew over once someone higher up took charge. But deep down, she knew that no supervisor could out-talk a system that had already judged. The triplets were gone now, escorted quietly to a private lounge by airport security. Gentle, respectful, almost reverent. Chloe had looked back once. Just once. Her eyes steady, as if memorizing the scene she'd leave behind. The officer leading them had whispered to another agent. The Horizon badge triggered it. Full code sequence. It's verified. Paige had overheard those words. They wouldn't stop replaying in her head. Somewhere above the Pacific, an encrypted line connected the FAA Ethics Division, Homeland Security, and Horizon Defense Analytics. Status on Zenith Jet? A deep voice asked. Still grounded across 7 nations, came the reply. No flights permitted to enter or leave protected corridors. Good. Keep it that way until the audit concludes. A pause. And the children? Under federal care, awaiting parental contact. No media access granted. Perfect. Let the story speak for itself. Back in Seoul, the Horizon Command Center was chaos disguised as order. Dozens of monitors streamed live feeds. Airports, terminals, offices, each with a flashing red icon in the corner. Gray flag active. Director Ji-Yeon Han stood in front of the primary display, her jaw set, her expression unreadable. Confirmed that all affected flights belong solely to Zenith Jet. Confirmed, ma'am. No civilian traffic impacted. Good. She exhaled slowly, then added, begin the statement. Her communications officer nodded. A press release began scrolling across international news channels within minutes. Breaking. Horizon Ethics System activated after verified child assault incident at Incheon International. 9 airports have suspended Zenith Jet operations pending investigation. Estimated losses exceed $9 million. Officials confirmed the trigger was lawful and within Horizon parameters. The world read those words, and for the first time in history, no one could argue with them, because the system itself had decided. In the lounge, Chloe sat quietly beside her sisters, a blanket around her shoulders. The officer who'd escorted them offered water, cookies, and silence. Celine asked in a small voice, "Are we in trouble?" Chloe shook her head. "No, they are." Clara stared at her. "The lady?" Chloe hesitated, then nodded. "Her, and everyone who let her be like that." Outside, a TV mounted on the wall played a news broadcast. Paige Rutherford's photo appeared beside the Zenith Jet logo. The caption read, "Senior attendant suspended amid global ethics scandal." Celine turned her face into the blanket. "I don't like that picture." Chloe didn't look away. "It's not about her picture," she said softly. "It's about the reflection." At headquarters, Paige's name was already being scrubbed from internal systems. Her employee login returned access denied. Her crew app displayed one sentence in red. Status: under federal ethics review. Do not assign flights. Her phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't corporate. It was personal. A text from her sister. Paige, is it true? She didn't reply. There were no words left that could survive the truth. By late afternoon, the damage was no longer about money. It was moral. Stockholders pulled out. The press dubbed it the day the sky stopped. Federal regulators announced an emergency summit. Airlines worldwide scrambled to review their passenger conduct training. In London, the Aviation Standards Commission issued a statement. Passenger dignity violations will now constitute Class A breaches under international law. And in Washington, the FAA spokesperson added, when machines enforce ethics faster than humans, it's time we catch up. That evening, as twilight brushed the runway in shades of orange and steel, Gate 19 was empty again. Only cleaning staff moved between the rows of chairs. The silence had returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was cleaner, sharper, like the world had exhaled and something dark had finally left the air. Paige walked past the window, escorted by 2 federal officers. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Through the glass, she saw the reflection of the sky, wide, endless, and unbothered. You're lucky, one of the officers said quietly. If that badge hadn't stopped you, the cameras would have. Paige didn't answer. She didn't need to. Somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't luck. It was consequence. At that same moment, across the world, Chloe Hahn looked out another window, this one from a small room in the ethics wing of the Horizon Center. She watched the planes parked in rows, grounded but gleaming under the fading light. Celine yawned beside her. Are they still not flying? No, Chloe said. Not until they remember why they do. Clara leaned on her shoulder. Will they remember? Chloe looked up, the faintest smile ghosting her face. The sky always remembers. Outside, the last flight number on the board flickered gray, then turned off completely. The system rested. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like silence. It felt like peace. By sunrise, the story had crossed every border. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. From airport lounges in New York to cafe TVs in Manila, 3 words kept repeating across screens, news feeds, and headlines. The sky watched back. The video from Gate 19 had become the most shared clip of the year. The slap, the silence, the lights dimming, all captured from 3 different angles, stitched together by strangers online who didn't even know the girls' names. It wasn't about outrage anymore. It was about reflection. In a world used to noise, this story was spreading because of what it didn't have. No screaming, no chaos. Just a calm system doing what people should have done. At a morning press conference, Minister Han, the girl's father, stood behind a row of microphones. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the fatigue of a man who'd seen the cost of silence too many times. Let me be clear, he said, reading from no notes. The system did not malfunction. It fulfilled its purpose. A reporter shouted, Minister Han, did your children cause this shutdown? He met the question head on. My children didn't shut down an airline, he said. An airline shut itself down when it failed to treat dignity as policy. The room fell silent. No one typed for a few seconds. No one even blinked. He continued, his tone quieter but heavier. The Horizon AI doesn't seek punishment. It seeks reflection. That was always its purpose, to make sure empathy doesn't have to wait for apology. Behind him, a large display showed the Horizon logo, a wing-shaped arc surrounding a single word, trust. Across the ocean in Washington, D.C., a Senate subcommittee called an emergency meeting. Every major airline representative was there, along with Horizon defense executives and FAA officials. The air in the chamber was heavy with ego and discomfort. An FAA administrator adjusted his microphone. What we witnessed at Gate 19 was a historic first, a system enforcing ethics faster than humans could react. A senator leaned forward. You're saying artificial intelligence made a moral decision? The administrator nodded. It didn't replace us. It reminded us. A murmur spread through the room. The CEO of Zenith Jet shifted in his seat. With respect, sir, we've lost $9 million in revenue and reputation in 24 hours. You're treating this like progress. The FAA official turned toward him, eyes calm but cutting. When progress hurts, it usually means it's working. The senator's next words sealed it into history. Effective immediately, all major U.S. carriers will be required to adopt Horizon's Passenger Dignity Protocol. The vote passed 7-0. Meanwhile, in a quiet office inside Horizon Command Seoul, Director Ji-Eun Han watched the coverage in silence. Her phone buzzed every 10 seconds. Messages from ministers, international aviation boards, journalists begging for comment. She ignored all of them. Instead, she looked at a photo on her desk. 3 little girls, smiling under a cherry blossom tree in matching uniforms. Her niece, Chloe, stood in the center, saluting. Ji-Eun whispered to the empty room. You did exactly what it was built for. Her assistant knocked softly. Ma'am, the London Aviation Ethics Council just issued a statement. They're calling it the Horizon Precedent. Ji-Eun smiled faintly. Good. Maybe now people will stop calling it a machine. At the same moment, in a small interview room inside Incheon's Federal Terminal, Paige Rutherford sat across from 2 investigators. The walls were bare. A single camera blinked red in the corner. One of the investigators slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, the viral video played silently, her own hand mid-swing, the child's head turning from the impact, the pause that followed. Paige's eyes filled, but not with tears, just exhaustion. I didn't think, she whispered. I thought she was pretending. The investigator leaned back. You didn't ask. You assumed. Paige nodded. I've worked 18 years. I thought I could tell who belongs. And now? Her voice cracked. Now, I'm not sure I belong anywhere. He didn't answer. He just turned the tablet around, pressed pause, and said, That's what reform looks like. The world stops until we decide who we really are. In a Tokyo newsroom, a journalist wrote his editorial slowly, the way people write when they know their words might outlive the news cycle. Gate 19 wasn't about artificial intelligence or airline policy. It was about accountability. For years, passengers have trusted that systems protect them. But maybe it's time we trust systems that learn from us instead. Because when a child's silence speaks louder than a corporation's excuses, the world finally starts listening. He paused, reading it once more before filing it. It didn't need edits. Truth never does. By evening, Zenith Jet's CEO appeared on live television, looking 20 years older than the day before. He began with the sentence his lawyers told him not to say. I am sorry, he continued. No system failed us. People did. We will cooperate fully with the Horizon Review and accept any sanction. To the Han family, your children reminded us that the skies don't belong to companies. They belong to conscience. When he finished, the broadcast went silent for 3 seconds before the anchor spoke again. Those 3 seconds felt like the world taking a breath. At home, in a quiet apartment overlooking the Han River, Chloe sat on her bed, her sisters beside her. The badge lay on the nightstand, the faint Horizon emblem catching the moonlight. Celine brushed her fingers over it. Will it light up again? Chloe shook her head. It doesn't need to. Clara asked, Are you scared it'll happen again? Chloe smiled, a small, knowing smile. If it does, it means the world's still paying attention. Outside, a jet flew overhead. Not Zenith Jet, not Horizon. Just a plane, ordinary and bright against the night sky. But for the first time in a long time, it sounded different, softer, honest. The world hadn't ended at Gate 19. It had started watching, and once the sky learns how to see, it never forgets. The room was too bright to hide in. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, white and unforgiving. The air smelled like disinfectant and paper, clean, controlled, emotionless. Paige Rutherford sat in the center, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, 2 investigators from the Federal Aviation Ethics Division studied her without speaking. Behind them, a small camera blinked its red dot, recording everything. The silence, the twitch of her fingers, the way her shoulders refused to drop. When the older investigator finally spoke, his voice wasn't sharp. It was the kind of calm that made excuses sound louder. "Ms. Rutherford," he said, "you understand this interview is being documented as part of the gray flag inquiry?" Paige nodded. "Yes." Her voice cracked, thin from sleeplessness. "Do you know why you're here?" She hesitated. "Because I lost control." The younger investigator shook his head slightly. "No. You're here because you thought you had it." Paige swallowed. "I thought they were pretending." The man leaned forward. "Pretending what?" "Pretending to belong." The words fell out before she could shape them into something softer. She wished she could pull them back, but the air in the room didn't allow for revision. The younger investigator glanced at the tablet in front of him. The paused video glowed between them. Paige's hand raised mid-motion, 3 small girls flinching, the echo of a slap that had traveled around the world. "Is this you?" he asked. Paige nodded once, her eyes fixed on the table. "Yes." "And this?" He pressed play, the screen showing her lips moving. "Step aside." She winced. "Yes." The older investigator paused the clip and looked at her. "Why did you say that?" Paige rubbed her palms together until they burned. "Because that's what we were trained to say when there's confusion at the gate." "Trained to say," he repeated slowly. "Or used to saying." Paige's throat tightened. "Used to." The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was true. In another building, on another floor, Minister Hahn stood behind a glass panel, watching the live feed. He didn't enjoy it. He didn't even want to be there. But this was procedure. His voice over the comm was measured, professional, but there was something underneath it, something personal. "She has the right to legal representation," he said. "She waived it," one of the agents replied. "She said she wanted to speak." Hahn nodded slowly. "Then let her." He knew this wasn't about vengeance. The system wasn't designed to punish, it was designed to teach. Back in the room, Paige stared at her reflection in the mirrored glass. She could feel someone watching. She wondered if it was him, the man from the news, the one with the calm voice who'd said his children hadn't shut down an airline, only forced it to face itself. "I've worked flights for 17 years, she said suddenly, the words spilling out. "You start to think you can tell who belongs, who matters, who's trouble. It's instinct. It's how you stay ahead." The younger investigator nodded. "And where does that instinct come from?" Paige blinked, caught off guard. "Experience." "No," he said softly. "It comes from habits you stopped questioning." Her lips parted, but no words came. The older investigator leaned back, his gaze steady. "You're not the first, Ms. Rutherford. The system doesn't wake up for mistakes. It wakes up for patterns." Paige frowned. "Patterns?" He turned the tablet toward her again. The feed changed. Different airports, different dates. Faces of attendants, passengers, incidents. People spoken to harshly, turned away, belittled. "The Horizon system monitors behavioral ethics," he said. "It detected a string of violations linked to your crew code over 2 years. Small ones. Comments, tone, discretionary seat reassignments." Paige's stomach dropped. "You were watching me?" "We weren't," he said quietly. "The system was. You just gave it enough data to learn the pattern." She felt sick. Her voice shook. "I didn't mean harm. I just didn't notice," he finished. The words hung there, heavy as guilt. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the lights filled the silence like a heartbeat. Finally, Paige asked, "What happens now?" The older investigator folded his hands. You'll face an ethics board. They'll determine if you're fit to hold federal certification. But I'll be honest, this isn't about your job anymore. She frowned. Then what is it about? He studied her. Whether you understand why the world needed to stop for you to see yourself. Paige's eyes filled. They were just kids, she whispered. He nodded once. Exactly. In another room, Chloe Hahn sat with her sisters, watching the same feed on a muted monitor. She didn't look satisfied. She looked tired. Older, somehow. Celine leaned forward. Are they yelling at her? Chloe shook her head. No, they're letting her hear herself. Clara frowned. Is that better? Chloe thought for a moment. Sometimes silence is louder than yelling. Their aunt, Director Ji-eun Han, stood in the doorway, listening. Your father said something like that once, she murmured. Chloe looked up. Did he mean it? Ji-eun smiled faintly. He built an entire system around it. Back in the room, the interview was ending. Paige sat quietly as the investigator stood. The older one hesitated before leaving and said, The system logged one more note, Ms. Rutherford. She looked up, wary. What kind of note? He read from his screen. Subject showed signs of remorse. Emotional alignment detected. Gray flag sequence complete. What does that mean? She asked. He paused at the door. It means the system believes you learned something. Whether the world forgives you, well, that's still a human decision. When the door closed, Paige let out a sound she didn't recognize. A half sob, half laugh. Not relief, not despair. Just the sound of a person realizing that the sky had been watching long before the cameras ever did. Outside, Minister Han watched the lights on the monitor dim. The system had gone back to standby. No noise, no punishment, just quiet. He whispered, almost to himself, the goal was never revenge. It was recognition. And somewhere deep inside the network, the horizon badge in Chloe's room pulsed once, faint and fleeting, as if it agreed. The world had stopped shouting. For the first time in weeks, airports ran on schedule again. Flights lifted off. Gates reopened. The chaos had turned into something else, an echo that lingered not in noise, but in policy. Screens across terminals still carried the message, dignity is not optional. It wasn't just a slogan anymore. It was law. At the International Ethics Summit in Washington, rows of officials, airline executives, and journalists filled the hall. Banners of the newly adopted Horizon Passenger Protocol hung behind the podium. The chatter was low but charged. Cameras clicked. The hum of translation headsets layered over the sound of typing fingers. When Minister Han walked to the microphone, the room went still. He wasn't there as a politician today. He was there as a father, and the architect of a system that had forced the world to look at itself. He began softly, no notes in his hand, only a folded paper badge resting on the podium. 3 weeks ago, he said, a flight attendant raised her hand against a child, and for the first time in history, it wasn't a child who cried. It was the system that answered. He let that hang there, just long enough for the silence to grow heavy. This protocol isn't about punishing airlines, he continued. It's about protecting what we all forget when we chase efficiency. Dignity. The quiet, invisible kind that never makes headlines until it's taken away. He looked out over the crowd, scanning faces, some ashamed, some defiant, most thoughtful. The girls who stood still at Gate 19 didn't start a revolution, he said. They reminded one that had been waiting to happen. Outside the summit, crowds gathered behind barriers, holding signs that read, "Respect flies higher," and "Never Gate 19 again." A woman in a pilot's uniform handed out ribbons. For every passenger who was told they didn't belong, she said to a reporter. That ends now. On a nearby screen, footage rolled from inside the summit. We'll start with the recording, he said. The speakerphone clicked. The 2-minute file played, flat, undeniable. The words hung in the air like smoke that didn't dissipate. Sometimes these kids think sympathy equals entitlement. I'm just maintaining standards. A camera shutter snapped. No one coughed. The room felt smaller than it had a minute before. Martin let the silence breathe. That was one of our people, he said evenly. That was a failure. In judgment, in training, and in the enforcement of policy. Not a public relations problem. A moral one. He didn't look at legal when he said it. An ethics board member adjusted her glasses. "We'll enter the audio and transcript into the record," she said. Her voice wobbled, but only once. Hannah leaned toward Elias. "Evidence," she whispered. "Footprints." A staffer placed a small plaque on the table, brushed metal, black letters. "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." Murmurs rolled across the room like wind across grass. Someone on the press line swallowed too close to their mic. Martin nodded toward the plaque. "This was installed under Seat 1A on select aircraft, part of a memorial program honoring crew members who died on duty," he said. "On Flight 417, we didn't just fail a passenger. We failed one of our own." He didn't say mother. He didn't have to. He turned a page in his notes. "Here is what we're doing." Phones lifted. Typing accelerated. "Effective immediately, we are instituting the Reed Charter, a dignity protocol that governs seat enforcement, customer interaction, and in-flight escalation. It includes 3 actions. 1. We're suspending any discretionary appearance-based enforcement. If it's not in the manual, you can't invent it in the aisle. 2. We're launching mandatory training, dignity in action, for all 6,200 customer-facing staff. Not modules with quizzes you can guess through. Workshops with coaches who will stop you mid-sentence and ask, "What did you just assume?" 3. We're establishing an independent passenger dignity review panel with public reporting. No more quiet filing cabinets. He raised his eyes from the paper. "We will also be speaking the name we've too often put in small print, Grace Reed. Her service will no longer live under an armrest. It will live in how we treat people at 34,000 feet. At the far end of the table, Combs shifted in his chair, prepared to interject with controlled language. Martin didn't yield the mic. "We have requested a meeting with the Reed family," he said. He looked back to the gallery, voice softer. "We'll do it on their terms." The moderator tilted his mic. "We'll take questions." A reporter stood. "Is Ms. Briggs being fired?" Corporate counsel gripped his pen. "Ms. Briggs has been suspended pending investigation." The reporter kept his eyes on Martin. "Do you agree with that decision?" Martin didn't blink. "I agree with due process," he said. "And I agree with consequences." Another hand shot up. "Are you apologizing to the passenger?" "We are not apologizing if anyone felt offended," Martin said, using the air quotes like a tool he did not enjoy. "We are apologizing for what we did. To a 16-year-old who was where we told him he could be." A quiet current ran through the room. Relief, disbelief, respect. It was hard to tell which, in what proportion. But no one missed the fact that he'd used the word we. Hannah nodded, the corners of her eyes bright. Elias stared down at his notebook as if the words needed someplace to land. The moderator glanced toward the gallery. "If the passenger would like to make a statement, he may." Heads turned. The air thinned. Hannah looked at Elias. "You don't have to," she said. He stood anyway. Not fast, not dramatic. He slipped the notebook from under his arm and walked the few steps to the small floor mic. His backpack strap creaked like a whisper. The red ring flickered alive. "My name is Elias Reed," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but the room bent toward it. "I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came because I wanted to sit in a seat my mom once served from." He glanced at the plaque on the table, then back at the board. "I don't need a speech," he said. "I just need you to mean the words on your magazine." He swallowed. "Dignity is not an upgrade. It's a promise." No one moved. The sentence sat perfectly where it belonged, in a room built for promises. He stepped back, turned, and returned to his seat. Hannah took his hand. He let her. The moderator cleared his throat, voice thin. "Thank you." A final question came from the press row. "Mr. Hale, are you worried about the stock?" Martin exhaled through his nose, the ghost of a laugh, but not at the question. "Today I'm worried about keeping our word," he said. "Stocks follow stories. We're deciding what story we are." He looked out once more at the room, as if memorizing the faces that had witnessed this exact arrangement of facts, and lifted the gavel. "This session is adjourned," he said. The red ring died. The cameras stayed on. People stood. Chairs scraped. A dozen staffers swarmed the front like a weather system. The plaque remained, catching a narrow blade of light that had found its way through the blinds. Hannah and Elias stayed seated until the row cleared. When they finally stood, the aisle opened easily before them. No stairs, no hush, just space. On the way out, they passed a monitor streaming the hearing on delay. The chyron read, "Airlines, dignity is a promise." Reed Charter announced Elias didn't slow. He didn't need to watch himself. He had been there. And for the first time since Gate 47, the world had met him in the same place. 3 weeks after the hearing, the air inside every Air terminal felt different. Not louder, not busier, just watchful. Screens that once looped destination ads now carried a short message on rotation. Dignity is not an upgrade, it's a promise. The Reed Charter, 2025. Passengers paused to read it. Some smiled faintly. Some simply nodded, as if recognizing something they'd always wanted an airline to say out loud. At Gate 47, Washington, D.C., a crowd had gathered. Not reporters this time, not executives in suits. Families, former crew members, staff in fresh uniforms with silver pins newly engraved with 2 words, "Grace Seats." The rededication ceremony wasn't grand. No speeches scripted for applause, just rows of simple chairs, the smell of jet fuel drifting through the glass, and the low hum of departing flights. Elias stood at the back beside Hannah, holding the same notebook that had followed him through every chapter of this strange, unstoppable story. He hadn't written in it for days. Maybe because there wasn't much left to say. A representative from the ethics board stepped up to the mic, voice shaking slightly. "We'd like to welcome you all," she began. "Today, we complete something that should have begun long ago. Across every Air aircraft, the first-class seats will now carry the name Grace Seats, in honor of those who served passengers with dignity and compassion." Her words hung in the air, quiet but resonant. Beside the gate window stood one of the new chairs, sleek, cream leather. Beneath the armrest, a brushed silver plaque read, "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." And below that, smaller text, "In memory of all who made the skies kinder." Elias's throat tightened. It wasn't pride he felt. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was something deeper. The fragile peace that comes from seeing the world bend, just slightly, toward what's right. Reporters took photos from a respectful distance. The CEO, Martin Hale, approached the microphone only after the crowd quieted again. "When I started flying," he said, "we used to tell passengers to sit back and relax. We assumed comfort was enough, but dignity takes work. It takes listening. It takes remembering who taught us to care in the first place." He glanced toward Elias, then toward the seat beside the plaque. "Today, we remember Grace Reed, and we acknowledge her son, Elias, for reminding us what her legacy truly means." A ripple of gentle applause spread through the terminal. No whistles, no flashbulbs. Just a wave of human hands agreeing that something had been repaired. Afterward, people began taking photos of the plaque. A few airline employees touched it lightly before walking away, as though they were promising to carry it forward. Marla Briggs wasn't there. She'd issued her own apology in a letter that went public 2 days earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. "I saw a seat and forgot to see a person. I can't undo that, but I can start over." Elias had read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it inside his notebook. Not as forgiveness, just as record. When the crowd thinned, Martin approached him. "You doing okay?" he asked. Elias shrugged. "Still getting used to people knowing my name. Martin smiled. They'll forget soon enough, but they'll remember the rule that came from it. He pointed to the words on the digital display looping above the gate. Dignity is not an upgrade. That line was yours, he said. You said it first. Elias looked down at his sneakers, embarrassed. I just said what my mom used to tell me. Then maybe she should have run this company, Martin said, half a laugh in his voice. She probably would have done a better job. They shook hands, an old-fashioned gesture, quiet and unremarkable, but heavy with meaning. Later, after most of the staff had gone, Hannah and Elias lingered by the gate window. A plane rolled down the runway, its body painted with a new decal, the Grace Fleet. Hannah sighed softly. Look at that, she said. Your mom's name on the wings of half the world. He didn't answer right away. He watched the plane rise, its shadow shrinking across the tarmac until it disappeared into the light. She wouldn't want them to make her a saint, he said finally. She'd just want them to treat people right. Seems like they're trying, Hannah said. Yeah, he smiled faintly. Maybe the system can learn after all. He opened his notebook one last time, flipped to the first page, where he'd written the words, Seat 1A. Grace Reed. Rules are rules. He drew a single line through the last phrase and replaced it with, Grace seats. Dignity rules. He laughed quietly at how corny it sounded, but Hannah only smiled. That's how movements start, she said. With something that sounds too simple to be important. They walked toward the boarding doors. Security waved them through without fuss, just another pair of travelers. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, Elias glanced down the corridor of light and shadow. The hum of engines filled the air, a sound that used to hurt, but now carried something gentler. Inside the cabin, he passed through rows of seats, economy, business, first, and paused at the front. Seat 1A waited empty. A new attendant, young and nervous, smiled at him. You're welcome to sit anywhere, she said. He nodded, but didn't sit. Instead, he ran his fingers along the cool edge of the plaque, tracing each letter of his mother's name. For a heartbeat, it felt like she was there, standing just behind him, her voice steady in his ear. Every seat deserves the same care. He took a breath, let it out slowly, and whispered, I know. Then he turned back toward his row, not 1A, not special, just his, and sat down. The plane doors closed. The engines built to a low, familiar roar. Through the window, he watched sunlight spill over the wing, catching the faint outline of the words painted there, the Grace seats, and smiled. For the first time since that flight, the sky felt exactly how his mother described it, fair, endless, and kind. The email arrived on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning that doesn't try to be anything except itself. Elias was at the kitchen table, spoon in his cereal, sunlight spilling across a pile of envelopes he hadn't opened because none of them could possibly change how the sky felt. His phone buzzed once. Subject: From the office of the CEO. Thank you. He just looked at it for a few seconds, as if staring might turn it into something smaller. Hannah, who'd dropped by with a bag of clementines and a You Need Fiber lecture, set the fruit down and nodded toward the screen. Go on, she said. Let it talk. Elias opened the message. From Martin Hale, Arion Air. To Elias Reed. Subject: For your mother and for you. Elias, I can't replace the years you lost or the seat you were denied. I can't change a sentence that hurt the moment it left someone's mouth. What I can do is keep a promise. Bay. As of this morning, all first-class seats across our fleet carry the Grace Seats plaque. More than a nameplate, it's a standard. Our crews have completed the first round of Dignity in Action training. We have already removed 3 discretionary practices that invited bias, and we've rewritten the escalation policy so that feel can't outrank fact. You said something at the hearing that we've printed on the first page of every manual. Dignity is not an upgrade. It's a promise. We're keeping it. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, not for a photo, not for a headline, just to listen. With respect, Martin Elias read it twice. The second time, slower. The words didn't try to sound perfect. They tried to sound true. He handed the phone to Hannah. She read quietly, then exhaled like someone setting down a heavy box. "That's not PR," she said. "That's a person." Elias didn't answer right away. He slid his cereal bowl aside and pulled his notebook closer, the one that had gathered his days into something that made sense. On the first page, Seat 1A, Grace Reed. Rules are rules. He rested his palm, as if to steady the past before writing into it. "What if I write back?" he asked. Hannah smiled. "Then you'll be doing what you've done the whole time." He opened a new document. His fingers hovered, then settled. From Elias Reed to Martin Hale. Subject, Re. For your mother and for you, Mr. Hale. Thank you for the letter. My mom believed dignity is a muscle. You have to use it, or it forgets what it's for. I'm glad your people are using it. I don't need a meeting unless it helps the next kid who sits where I sat. If you want to listen, listen to the quiet moments on your flights, the ones without cameras. That's where it starts. One request: don't make my mom a statue. Make her a standard. Keep teaching crews to see people before policies. Keep the Reed Charter bolder than the fine print. If you do that, you've already met with me. Respectfully, Elias. He stared at the last line for a beat, then hit send before he could ruin it by overthinking. The message left with a soft whoosh, and a weight he didn't know he was still carrying shifted in his chest. Hannah peeled a clementine and placed a section on his notebook like a seal. "That'll do," she said. He laughed. "You and your citrus diplomacy." "Fiber and justice," she said. "Keeps the world moving." For the rest of the morning, small pieces of proof kept arriving, not as headlines, but as ordinary things finally behaving like they should. A push notification from the airline app. Reed Charter Update. Phase 2. Appearance-based enforcement removed. Clear seat eligibility chart posted publicly. Anonymous crew hotline for bias concerns activated. A text from Lewis. No emojis, just a line. Saw a new crew brief today. It's different, good different. A photo from a former co-worker of Grace Reed. A crew room whiteboard covered in shaky signatures beneath the words, "We will not look away." None of it felt like triumph. It felt like maintenance, the good kind. That afternoon, a package arrived addressed to Elias Reed in a handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside, a small flat box and a letter on thick paper with an old logo in the corner. "Elias, I flew with your mother twice. She corrected me once, in front of a difficult passenger, and saved me twice. This was hers. She left it in my tote the week before the accident. I kept meaning to return it and never did. I'm sorry it took me 7 years. With love and respect, Marjorie K. Crew 214. Inside the box lay a silver service pin, 2 wings framing a tiny torch. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, "Grace, keep the light." Elias pressed his thumb to the metal until his skin warmed it. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. The pin did the crying for him, the way objects sometimes do when your body is busy staying upright. He set it beside the notebook, then took a photo and sent it to Martin with no caption. A minute later, 3 dots appeared, then a reply. "We'll add a torch to the new training badge, for the light that keeps promises honest." Elias smiled at the screen. "Okay," he whispered. "That's something." At sunset, he and Hannah walked to the small park under the final approach path. Planes stitched the sky in slow silver arcs, each one pulling a little line of twilight behind it. He used to watch them and wonder which ones his mother was on. Now he watched and thought about who sat in row 1, touching a plaque without knowing which hands had made it necessary. A little girl in light-up sneakers stood with her dad, counting the planes. That one's going to New York," she announced with the authority of children who trust their guesses. "Maybe," her dad said, smiling. "Maybe it's just going where people need to go." Elias glanced at Hannah. "Do you think this sticks?" he asked. "After the trend dies?" She took her time. "Not by itself. she said. Trends are weather. Standards are climate. You keep a climate by tending it. He nodded, pocketed the pin, and looked up as another jet passed low enough to ruffle his hair. He thought of his mother in the aisle, tucking blankets, making eye contact with the nervous, the rushed, the invisible. He thought of the seat with her name on it, and the hundreds of other seats with no names at all that deserved the same care. His phone buzzed one more time. A final email for the day. From Dignity in Action Program. Subject: Training Module Feedback Request. We're piloting the new workshop next week with frontline crews. Would you consider watching the first 15 minutes and telling us if the language feels human? No cameras, no PR, just help. Elias laughed softly. They want my opinion on tone? Hannah shrugged. Who better? He typed a short reply. Sure. If it helps someone feel seen 5 feet sooner than I did, I'm in. And hit send. The sky dimmed to that steady blue that feels like a held breath. A plane thumped the air above them. Somewhere, on that plane, someone would need a blanket, a glass of water, a second try, a kinder rule. Somewhere, someone would offer it. He slipped the silver pin back into its box and slid the box into his hoodie pocket. The weight was small and right. Ready? Hannah asked. Yeah, he said. Let's go home. They walked toward the streetlights, the sound of engines fading into something almost like quiet. The world wasn't fixed, but it was adjusting, and for the first evening in a long time, that felt like enough. Morning came early over the Potomac, the sky the same pale blue his mother used to call flight color. Elias stood on the observation deck outside Terminal C, a carry-on beside him, watching a plane rise into the clean light. He wasn't traveling anywhere in particular. Not yet. He'd come just to see what it felt like to stand here without flinching. Below, the white fuselage glinted gold in the sunrise. Ariane Air Flight 416, same route number, new chapter. Its tail carried a small torch emblem beside the words, The Grace Fleet. The sight made his chest tighten and loosen all at once. He thought about how people called it the incident, as if that one day could hold everything that followed. The hearings, the letters, the policies, the faces he'd never forget. But for him, it had never been just an incident. It was a continuation of his mother's work. Unfinished service finally completed by strangers who learned to care. Inside the terminal cafe, the TV played a muted news segment. A scrolling banner read, Ariane Air's Dignity Charter marks 1 month. Industry-wide standards emerge. Elias smiled faintly into his coffee. Somewhere, buried beneath all the press releases and metrics, the system had learned a human language again. He pulled out his notebook, edges worn, corners soft, and flipped to the last blank page. There was one entry left to write. Mom. They changed the seats. They changed the rules. Maybe not the world, but something close enough to matter. They listen now. Not just to me, to everyone who looks like they don't belong until they do. Your name's flying again. It's everywhere. But what I'm proudest of? It's not the plaques. It's that they finally see people the way you did. Thank you for teaching me that quiet doesn't mean weak. It means steady. Love, Eli. He set the pen down, folded the page, and slipped it into the back pocket of the notebook. Through the glass, the next departing plane taxied into view. Families lined up near Gate 47. Business travelers, young parents, an elderly couple helping each other with carry-ons. He spotted a flight attendant standing at the jet bridge, welcoming passengers with a calm smile. New uniform, same colors. Her wings pin gleamed in the morning light. A small torch now etched above the airline logo. Elias caught her voice as she greeted a nervous little boy boarding alone. Don't worry, sweetheart. You're safe. I'll keep an eye on you. Something in the tone, the quiet confidence, made him blink hard. For a split second he could almost hear his mother saying it. He turned toward Hannah, who had joined him with 2 steaming cups. It's happening, he said softly. She followed his gaze, then nodded. Justice doesn't always sound like a gavel. Sometimes it just sounds like kindness becoming normal." He smiled. "That's what she wanted, I think, for the sky to be fair again." "Looks like it is," Hannah said. Later that afternoon, Elias boarded his own flight, the first since that day. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, maybe just up, maybe just forward. When he reached the door, the new lead attendant scanned his pass and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reed," she said quietly, like a secret she'd been waiting to tell. Her nameplate read Marjorie K. He froze for a beat. The same name from the letter and the pin. She noticed. "You got it then," she said softly, eyes kind. "Your mother's light." He nodded, unable to form words. Marjorie's hand rested on the doorway. "Every flight I start, I touch that torch, just so you know." He managed. "Thank you." "Thank her," she said. "We just follow her lead." He walked through the cabin, past rows of faces. Different colors, languages, lives. All equal at 34,000 feet. When he reached seat 1A, he stopped. The plaque gleamed beneath the armrest. "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." He brushed his fingers across it, just once, then kept walking. He didn't sit there. He didn't need to anymore. His seat was row 15 window. Midway between the front and the back, the view, somehow, perfect. As the engines roared and the plane began its climb, he pressed his forehead to the glass. Clouds opened like curtains, and light spilled in. He imagined his mother somewhere beyond them, not watching over, not haunting, just present. In the hum, in the warmth, in the quiet that no longer hurt. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, he opened his notebook one last time and wrote 3 words at the bottom of the page. "The sky listens." He underlined it once, smiled, and closed the book. Hours later, the aircraft descended through soft dusk. Cities sparkled below like scattered constellations. As the plane leveled, the captain's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome home. From all of us on behalf of Air, thank you for flying with dignity." A few passengers smiled, not realizing those words had been rewritten by a 16-year-old with a notebook. Elias leaned back in his seat, the torch pin warm in his pocket. Outside, the world kept moving, people boarding, people landing, the endless rhythm of departures and returns. But for him, it wasn't about leaving or arriving anymore. It was about what stayed, the belief that systems could learn, that silence could lead to change, that dignity, once remembered, never truly lands. The wheels kissed the runway, smooth and sure. The sky above turned gold for one last moment before fading to blue. And somewhere, in the quiet between landing and applause, Elias whispered the words that closed the circle. "Welcome home, Mom."